Hey folks, welcome back. And this is Teach MA Dude, giving you the background and the behind the scenes look at what it is like to be a teacher in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, the greatest state in the nation, but does it really have the best schools? In this video, one of maybe many videos I'm going to produce, at least until I get identified, which I suspect will not be so difficult to do. I want to talk about one of these things that's really been pressing me, and that is this whole notion of why teachers quit teaching. And I just recently have been, I don't know, fallen into a slump where I've been watching a lot of these, why I got out. It's kind of cathartic because you get to hear why other people are leaving, and it kind of resonates with you because you feel a lot of the same things. Now, not the most positive stuff of all time, and in a not so positive world, probably something we usually try to avoid. But that being said, one thing I really want to get at is this idea that teachers leave teaching because of student behavior. And like the implications of that and how that comes off. And I just want to like dissect and kind of dive into that a little bit more. So you've already heard this all over the news and even before COVID-19, that pandemic. And that's been terrible in education. That's probably a whole different video. But even before the COVID-19 pandemic, there was a notion that kids' behavior was getting out of control. And so there's all kinds of surveys saying, when I first started teaching, I think it was something like, 50% of teachers quit in the first 5 years. The other week I heard now it's down to like 3 years. So 1 in 2 teachers gone in 3 years. And that's tough. So the biggest reason, or one of the biggest reasons it's always listed, is student behavior. And it irks me I feel like it's got this connotation to it. Because like to me, it feels like the student behavior got so bad the teacher couldn't take it anymore and they had to quit. And to me, it just feels that that's like saying the teacher couldn't handle it. And I just feel that it's a bigger picture than that. So one thing I'm going to do, the biggest thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to break it down to you from a teacher's perspective. And look, I'm going to admit, teachers are not blameless in this. I, in the first couple of years of my teaching, 2-3 years of my teaching, was a very passive teacher, right? I didn't have the most commanding presence. I think I was good at, interacting with the kids, but I think I was hesitant to lay that hammer down when I needed to be laying the hammer down. And I think the kids, as kids do, they're going to take advantage of that. Am I known as the best classroom manager to say? No, that's not what I'm known for. Okay. I'm going to be the first person to say that. I don't think I'm the best. I don't think I'm the worst. I would say I've grown exponentially in my ability to lead the classroom, since the beginning of my career. And that being said, I think people will tell you for many individuals, it's all something we can improve on. Now, that being said, I think I have noticed from a generational perspective that the millennial teachers, it's something millennial teachers tend to struggle with relative to maybe like Gen X or like boomer teachers. And like, if you look at the like shows like Abbott Elementary, they really play on that idea. You can see like the teachers that are like the millennial age struggling to kind of get a grip on that. Now, so we get it. Teachers aren't perfect. But I think the bigger picture behind why teachers leave is not necessarily that teachers like can't handle it as much as it's like that they don't feel supported in handling it. Now, one thing you got to understand is that at the end of the day, right, you got students' culture and identity. And so since people want to play the identity card, we got to look at that. So you got what students bring from home, that culture. You've got this culture of the school, And then you've got the culture that you set in your classroom. And the thing is, those three cultures are going to overlap, and they're going to kind of intersect, and they're going to kind of sometimes intersect in a way that's complementary, and they're sometimes going to intersect in a way that is going to be clashing. Okay. And so how that is kind of negotiated, I think, is where we're struggling currently on a societal level, right? Because as a teacher, I can set whatever policies I want, but those policies have to be, for lack of a better term, kosher with the policies of the school. And so in a school that's very focused on athletics and churning out very strong athletes, that's all fine and great. But then it can be difficult to combat that culture when you want to come at things from a very highly academic level. All right, because that can kind of be confusing and conflicting. And the reality is, teachers don't really have much of an influence sometimes on school culture. It's really up to leadership to set the tone for how much they want teachers to be involved, just like it's like the teachers to set the tone about how much they want students' voices to be counted, right? And so I think that goes to administration needing to treat teachers in a way similar to how they want the teachers to treat the students, right? If you want the teachers to give students voice, and you want them to have authority and agency within the classroom, and I think that's perfectly fine. But how do you think it looks when teachers don't have agency within the school? Why would that make me want to then replicate that to the students outside of my own intrinsic interest to do what's in the students' best, growth needed interest? Okay, so that's what I'm getting at. And then you have, of course, the culture that comes from outside of school and the extent to which students are supported at home. And, on one hand, you can say, look, we can't control what happens outside of school. But on the other hand, the reality is it influences what we do in the classroom. It influences students' attitude towards learning. It interacts students' attitude towards figures of authority, at least teachers. And to me, unfortunately, one of the saddest sayings I've heard recently is, this idea that the parents are afraid of the administrators are afraid of the principals, principals are afraid of the superintendent's afraid of the school board is afraid of parents, and parents apparently are afraid of the kids, and the kids ain't afraid of anyone. So I think that's probably an over exaggeration, but I think every joke contains some thread of truth to it. Okay, so that's the idea. We got the overlapping kind of Venn diagram, so to speak, of different cultures and how those cultures are negotiated. And I'm not meaning to play identity politics, but at the same time, students' identities are important to who they are. And if we don't value students' identities, they're not going to value being in our class. Okay, now we have to get into the reality of, we've addressed our classroom culture, right? So we can do what we can do within our classroom. However, we have to address two pieces, which is first the school culture and then the home culture. Now, in my opinion, this is my opinion and only my opinion, I personally, in my experience, tend to find that the typical stereotypical administrator today has taken a different approach than one in the past. Now, I think that today we're trying to focus on the why of behavior and understanding the root cause of behavior and having important collaborative problem-solving conversations with students to try to help them move forward. The problem is that this is basically being substituted for, I would say, a sufficient amount of consequence for the student to correct their behavior in the long term, right? So nothing seems to ever happen. And I think it shows through that, in my opinion, there's not quite as much discipline as I would like to be. So we as teachers know that when we are sometimes not disciplining our class well, we know we can feel it. And sometimes you've probably had this feeling before, teachers, where you've had a class that's out of kind of not, the most controlled. It's not controlled, and you can feel that some of your students feel it's not controlled. And like, that's kind of like when you feel your worst. For me, it's like, yeah, I can disappoint myself and I can do a bad job, but like when I feel my students disappointed in me, it's kind of like extra like kicking me when I'm down, so, and they know by the time they get to a high school age, they're perceptive of that stuff. So in any case, I think that the issue is, especially coming out of COVID, I think that we went a little bit, unfortunately, behavior wasn't going in a good direction. And I think coming out of COVID, we continued to not go in a good direction. And I think we came into it with this new idea of kind of wanting to address students' trauma and what they bring to the class and how it impacts learning. And look, I think that's important, but you can discipline students and you can hold them accountable for their behavior in a strict way. And you can also, with like consequences, and you can also try to understand the cause of their behavior. Because I think the problem is that students aren't being held to a high enough level of behavior that they understand what's expected of them as adults. I'm telling you this as a high school teacher, as a college teacher, and as a high school and college teacher overlapping at the same time, where I literally have been teaching since kids I taught could have been in both I almost had a kid in both my high school and my college class. So that's how long I've had an overlap on that. So I understand the impact of students not understanding that big leap. Okay. So that being said, we got to think about this. If students aren't being taught to have important conversations with adults when things go wrong, and I get it, those aren't easy to have, but if this goes to the whole K through 12 career and these students don't learn how to have these crucial conversations with adults when things go wrong, when students get used to the idea that their parents are just going to solve all of their problems, they're going to do their homeworks, they're going to call their teacher and bully their teacher and bully their principal, like, the thing is, they never learn to problem solve. And then the problem is they get to college and none of that BS works in college. And if you don't go to college, guess what? It doesn't work in your career either. Your mom and dad, or whoever your parent or guardian is, cannot call and complain to your boss and expect that you're going to get some kind of treatment. You have to have those conversations with your boss, and you are judged based on your ability to have those conversations effectively. It's something I learned way too late in life, and I want people to not have to learn that. But this is the issue. I cannot have a classroom culture like that if the school culture does not support it. So if the school culture is, hey, we're not going to ask students, we're not going to expect students to have those conversations. We're going to do things like, for example, if the student's going through a hard time in their life, and I get it, many students do, they're negotiating some issues, to have no communication at all. And then all of a sudden you have this student getting like 20%, and the school to say, well, we're going to offer every student, they were at least trying, so let's give them a minimum of a 50% because we want them to be able to pass. And I understand the wanting of the student to pass, but where's the part where the student and the teacher try to work together, try to have a conversation to move forward in a way where the student can learn something that satisfies what the teacher needs, and the teacher can get that satisfaction knowing that they've educated the student, because this teacher isn't in this to make some freaking money. The teacher is not getting paid enough as it is. They want to help the student, right? Y'all are complaining about this. The teacher is trying to help the kid. Teacher doesn't want anything out of it for themselves. They care less. If anything, they just want the satisfaction of knowing the kid earns the grade they earn and they taught the kid something. Geez. Okay. So that being said, If the school's culture is not that, then how am I supposed to expect the kid to engage in that kind of problem solving? So that is how the intersection of the school and the class culture is detrimental to the success of my ability to teach. And then, of course, we have the home culture. So the home culture's problem is that, unfortunately, for many reasons, some basically all of which are out of not all of which, but almost all of which are out of our control. Many parents are not supportive of schools. And I think it is a kind of vicious cycle, right? Of I didn't get anything out of my school career, so now I don't believe in schools, and now I'm against schools. But the reality is all you're doing is perpetuating a cycle, right? Because now your kid's not going to get anything out of school, and they're going to take the same perspective, and then they're going to have the same thing with their kid, except now grandpa or grandma and mom and dad are all against the school. So now it's like twice as many people. So there's this notion among whoever that apparently we are lazy, overpaid. We get all of our summers off. And we're trying to indoctrinate kids in our personal beliefs or some stuff like that. Look, let me tell you something. If you believe that, I'm very sorry to tell you that you're not really close to reality on that one. Teachers actually get paid less than people who have the same level of education as them. They get the summers off, except they don't get compensated for the summer. And if you think about it, we'll talk about later how many hours they put in and how that math works out. So we'll make that work. But in any case, there's this anti-school mentality. Not going to get to where that comes from. Again, that's for another time. You have parents who are busy with their lives and disconnected from their kids' education, which is an issue. And then you have parents who have certain cultural beliefs about what their role in school should be. Maybe they trust the teacher wherever they're at. I've heard that before, and kind of they just go what the teacher says and they don't feel like they need to communicate back. In any case, there has been a degradation in the level of high quality responsive home environments. And the issue is, while I understand that a lot of these kids have trauma coming from home, it's very frustrating when there's also not support coming from home. The reality is, if the kid grows up in an environment where the people who they look up most to are, they think about it like this. You got high schooler. They've gone 14, 15 years of their life, and they have not met you yet, but you know who they've been around? Their parent. So who do you think they get their beliefs from? Okay. So if their parent doesn't respect authority, they're not going to respect authority. Okay. Think about it like that. If their parent doesn't believe in school, or if their parent doesn't read to them when they're a kid, we can talk all about that. Or if their parent, for whatever reason, many things happen, that's going to influence how the kid perceives things. And especially if the parent's mentality is to not give consequences for when their child acts out at school, then think about it. If the people who have the biggest impact on your life don't believe it's a big issue that you are misbehaving at school, why would you think it was a big issue? And the reality is, kids of that age, their brains are not fully formed. Look, I'm not saying, and this is one of the biggest things, I don't think it's the kids' faults. I don't blame any of this on the kids. I think at the end of the day, all kids are naturally by nature good. They are perverted in some direction, and perverted, I mean that is, swayed in some direction by things that happen throughout their life. They have been subject to a system of very, very low expectations. And we have to, as teachers, come against a classroom culture where we have conflicts with a school culture and a home culture that doesn't meet the expectations that we have. And unfortunately, and in many cases, those expectations prevail. So at the end of the day, while I believe that, yes, it is true that many teachers do leave the profession due to disciplinary issues and the discipline that goes on, it is much more complicated than that, especially where I'm at in the state of Massachusetts. It's a lot more complicated than that. There's many, many factors, and it's not just about the student behavior. It's about the lack of support that they're receiving in handling that behavior and what goes wrong when some of the behaviors are out of control. All right, so that's this issue. A little bit breaking down kind of my thoughts behind that. And in other videos, I'm happy to go through like examples or that I've seen or heard of. But I just want to put this out there because I think it's really important to have the perspective of someone who's in the game still for now, about what that's about. So thanks for watching. I'm not sure if this will ever end up being a big video or who knows, but I'll put it out there. Have a great day, and I'll see you soon.